now time to take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. We begin at home, of course, as the Borno State Governor Babagana Zulum has alleged that some Nigerian politicians and members of the armed forces are acting as informants and collaborators for Boko Haram insurgents. In an interview, Zulum vowed that the state would strengthen its intelligence network and deal with saboteurs ruthlessly. The northeastern state is currently in the throes of a battle against insurgent Boko Haram and ISWAP fighters. Governor Zulum criticized the lack of equipment for the military and accused insurgents of having a superior technological advantage, saying the army does not have the necessary equipment on the ground to fight the insurgency. Zulum boasted that the government could end the scourge of terrorism in 6 months if it was able to remove what he called contractocracy, a situation where the anti-terrorism system benefited principally the interests of contractors rather than broader national interests. The governor lamented that contractocracy was fueling insurgency in the country. And now to some political news, as according to some reports, the coalition of opposition parties led by former Vice President Atiku Abubakar has adopted the African Democratic Congress as a platform to challenge incumbent President Bola Tinubu of the All Progressives Congress in the 2027 presidential election. However, a source at a meeting where the decision was said to have been taken says no decision of this nature has been reached yet, adding that adopting ADC was a proposal yet to be ratified. The high-level meeting of opposition leaders in Abuja, where proposals were made on whose platform the coalition would contest in 2027, was attended by a former governor of Kaduna State, Nasir El-Rufai, and national leader of Labour Party, Peter Obi. The closed-door meeting, chaired by Atiku, set up a committee to come up with a blueprint for its operations before its launch. Meanwhile, another source who was at the meeting informed Arise News that the information is not correct, while providing a proper perspective. He says 3 presentations were made on the appropriate political platform to be used by the coalition group, and a decision is yet to be reached. Lastly, in the economy, the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association yesterday lamented the continued decision of the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank of Nigeria to maintain the monetary policy rate at 27.5%, that's the interest rate, since November 2024. Despite a global wave of interest rate reductions aimed at revitalizing economic productivity and combating stagflation. Specifically, the LCCI stressed that the current MPR level was prohibitively high for private sector development. Likewise, NECA expressed concern over the CBN's continued reliance on monetary policy tightening. The MPC, at the end of its meeting on Tuesday, decided to keep all its monetary policy tools unchanged. MAN stated that the rigid stance of the MPC has continued to create unintended consequences that might deepen the parlous performance of the productive sector, and earnestly beseech the CBN to urgently reconsider its monetary stance. So we have security, politics, and the economy. Rufai, some of your key takeaways from today's headlines.
So a couple of things. I think what Governor Zulum was saying in effect about contractocracy is the fact, what we have always said all these years. In fact, I did an interview with Governor Kayode Fayemi, which has a degree in war studies, and we talked about the fact that with this insurgency, hasn't a military-industrial complex built? And he said, you can argue that something like that is already building. And that's always the case. And it even snowballs even into the not-for-profit organizations that are working around there, the NGOs and the likes. All of a sudden, Borno's real estate has surged so much. To get home for expatriates and NGOs that work around there, you pay quite a princely amount. Also, the contractors on ground, which is the military-industrial complex building around there. And that's what happens when you fought a war for a very long time. And that's why we say, please, the government must return to the drawing board. At first, have we been able to save Mate? He said about 80,000 people have had to leave Mate. It was there to boost confidence. Has that been resolved? Other parts that we have fought and successfully defeated Boko Haram, now they are coming back there. 4 years ago, we rehabilitated people, put people back to Mate, but they are back there. But they're increasingly living there because of Boko Haram insurgents. He also talked about the fact that there are informants among politicians. So what's the investigation as regards that? We need to be able to have this investigation. He's a governor, he's got some level of information. And even in the soldiers, we've always talked about the fact that, yes, there's some bad eggs amongst us. What are we doing to get rid of those people? And that's why I say intelligence is key. Intelligence, economic development, proper surveillance and reconnaissance, technological deployment, and education and provision of basic social amenities, healthcare, will be the key to unbundling things like that. See, in the 80s, when the Metiseni riot happened, there was a report done then to the government, and it indicated that if the poverty and the squalor continues in the north, all of this crisis will continue. And it's so easy to be able to recruit people like that. So he's led the charge. Where would the government follow? We need more equipment. I know the equipments are expensive, but we need to invest in security. Secondly, I just checked through the numbers now. Nigeria has one of the 6th highest interest rates in the world, MPR rates. How can businesses thrive? In fact, let me run through the list for you. You'll be amazed. At some point, Venezuela, 59% highest globally, driven by inflation. Turkey, 46%. Edward has been doing mad economics there as far as I'm concerned. Egypt, 27.2%. Malawi, 26%. Ghana, 27%. Nigeria, 27%. And Zimbabwe, after Nigeria, about 20.0%. That's as for 2024 data for Zimbabwe, and Argentina, less than 20%. For lending rates globally, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, Turkey, Egypt, Malawi, Ghana. Nigeria is 14.01 lending rates as of 2023. But now the MPR rate has shot to 27. You know what it means with 27%? It means that when you go to the bank, when the bank add their charges to it, some of the lending rate goes as much as 35%. How can businesses thrive in an environment of 35%? Even if they say you can make a return on investment of 35%, 35 to 40% threshold, because Nigeria is an emerging market. But you know that has been caught now because purchasing power has dropped. The state of play of the economy. It's harder to produce in Nigeria because of bureaucracy, no power, other attendant challenges, lack of infrastructure. So when you cut that out, so what does the return on investment? If you invest in Abidjan, because their currency is now stronger, you'll be quicker to make a dollar in Abidjan than to make a dollar here. It will take you 570 CFR to be able to make a dollar of your investment in Abidjan. In Nigeria, it will take you 1,600 Naira. So those are the problems on ground. That's why manufacturers are complaining. Coupled with the tariff situation, coupled with other ancillary costs, coupled with the fact that due to the forex fluctuations, they've lost trillions. And these are the problems on ground. But when we talk about them, people think we're joking. And now that the politicians are doing their coalition, they want to be able to come together. This is not the time for speculation. When they get their acts right, they should do whatever they're going to do. Part of the report also said they were even talking about the possibility of forming a new platform and all of that. Because these are the problems anybody that will emerge in 2027 will have to come face. But I see a lot of high-handedness among these politicians that are thinking of coalition. I see the fact that a lot of them want to be president. And once you have that, they might just make it easier for President Tinubu to emerge. So they must also have to be careful.
Okay, let me start with Governor Zulum. Governor Zulum is not saying anything that is new or original or that he has not said before. Before now, he had called on he had alerted the federal government to the fact that there was serious crisis, a surge in insurgency in his state, Borno State, and he wanted the federal government to come and help. He was told at that time that he was spreading, alarm, fake news, whatever. But again, when the situation in the Mate local government area occurred, 300 villages and towns became deserted. Only Mate local government was standing. He also, in a show of solidarity and confidence with the people, went there and slept overnight, backed by the military and the police. Again, he called on the federal government of Nigeria to please rush to Macedonia and help us. And now he has granted an interview on television where he repeated more or less the same things. And what has he been saying? He's saying that contractocracy is part of the problem. In other words, there are some people who benefit from the military establishment who just do contracts. at the expense of other people's lives and properties and security in other parts of the country. 2, he said that there are fifth columnists, even within the military, soldiers, who are acting as informants for these insurgents, bandits, terrorists, criminals. We all know that. 3, he said that President Tinubu should ignore sycophants, the people who downplay the issues in the Northeast and tell the president what he wants to hear. And here as governor, as a man that is on the ground, he says he knows what is going on. We know all of this. 4, he said that kinetic approach alone will not solve the problem. He's saying that government has to look at non-kinetic approach, political and economic dimensions. All of this has been part of the narrative up to now. 5, he praises the military, that the military is doing well, and that if the president were to listen to the military will know what to do to be able to find a solution to this problem. Well, it is standard practice for government officials to praise the military, to encourage them to see how they can do more. 6, he said, procurement process. We must take a look at that so that the military can get the equipment that they need early enough. So that's how I say all of this is not new. What is reiterated by Governor Zulum is the fact that, look, the battle against terrorism, banditry, insurgency, whether it's asymmetrical or not, has not been won. And government needs to do a lot more. And that the buck stops at the desk of President Tinubu. It's for President Tinubu to listen to him. The only controversial thing that I think Governor Zulum said in that interaction with the media was he saying, where he opposes the idea of state police, he prefers forest guards. Well, that can be debated. But this is not the forum for that debate this morning. Now, the second thing, quickly to the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. Well, the MPC, Monetary Policy Committee, met. 12 of them voted unanimously to hold, to retain the asymmetric, the MPR at 27.5%, to retain the asymmetric corridor at plus 500 minus 100 around the MPR, to retain the CRR at 50%, to retain the LDR at 50% for deposit money banks and 16% for merchant banks. And we said yesterday that it will appear that the Central Bank of Nigeria is still taking a cautious approach. It's trying to see how these measures, will yield more fruits before it can either change or still retain its position in the July 21 to 22 meeting, which is the next meeting. However, what we have seen is that the Naira stabilized a bit, and that was projected as a show of confidence in the Nigerian economy by investors. However, the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and the Nigeria Employers Consultative Assembly, NECA, have now reacted to that decision that was taken by the MPC at its last meeting. And what they are saying is that the cost of credit in Nigeria is still very high. It is the 6th highest in the world, they say. And that will frustrate manufacturing, make the cost of borrowing too high, make businesses difficult for small and medium-scale enterprises. They are accusing the Monetary Policy Committee of rigidity. They are saying that the Nigeria First policy is under threat. And in a statement issued by DG Manufacturers Association, Mr. Segun Ajayi Kadir, yeah, that's his name, Mr. Segun Ajayi Kadir, he was saying also that, look, the benchmark rates that the CBN has adopted should be reduced further to make things easier for manufacturers. The head of SCCI, Mrs. Almona, was saying more or less the same thing. NECA is saying also more or less the same thing. Now, they are saying that what they would like to see is a greater correspondence between fiscal and monetary policies. They think that the CBN is adopting only the monetary policy approach, where in defense of the CBN governor, Cardoso, when he had that post-MPC conference. He made the point that they too, they are asking for greater synergy with the fiscal authorities. But in any case, 2 points, quickly. Whatever can be done to ensure private sector development is to be encouraged, is to be insisted upon. 2, the manufacturing community in Nigeria is saying, these portfolio investors who come, make profit, give the impression of investor confidence, that's not where the government should be looking. The government should be looking at manufacturers in-house, private sector development within the country. Okay? You cannot argue with them at that, on that point. Number 3 point is that it would seem to me that MAN, SCCI, and NECA, they are, what is that word now? They are reacting after the fact. They are not proactive enough. These meetings are announced. Is there any interface between the private sector and the MPC or the central bank before these monetary policy committee meetings are held, so that they too can make their recommendations ahead? Everybody was saying up to a week before that MPC meeting that they are going to hold interest rates. So it's not as if MAN, SCCI, NECA did not know the way the narrative was going. Why didn't they speak before then? Why didn't they intervene before then? Now, after the fact, they are reacting. I don't think that is the best way to focus on this. As for ADC and the coalition, ADC was founded in 2005. And the chairman has been since then, Ralph Nwosu. At a point, the CCM, which was led by President Obasanjo, had some interaction with the ADC, African Democratic Congress, as it became to be known at the point of registration with INEC. And ADC has been in the presidential race over the years. It was the platform on which Professor Patu Tomi ran. It was the platform on which Obadiah Malafia, now of Blessed Memory, ran in 2019. It was the platform on which Dumebi Kachiku ran in 2023. Now, between that 2019 election and now, 2007 election and now, ADC has either been 4th, 7th, 8th, and 4th in the 2023 election. So it looks like an attractive platform. But what we hear is that a decision has not yet been taken. There are 3 tendencies within the coalition. There are those who are still looking at SDP, although SDP has said that these are opportunistic politicians who want to come and hijack the SDP. There are people who are saying it is possible to form a new political party. That's another group. There are those who are saying, okay, we should go to the ADC. I don't think we have any clear certainty. What we know is that the coalition has shown that it's still alive and that they are still meeting. After, had written that they seem to have been upstaged by the strategy and the bricksmanship and the ownership of the game tactics strategies of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and the APC. So, they may be playing possum, but they seem to have woken up at this moment. The details will be in what happens hereafter.
Absolutely. We hear that there would be some sort of a meeting on the 30th where resolutions will be made. But the major point of concern is how can we evolve from this politics of special purpose vehicles to get into office? Because we've seen that what it creates is that it creates personality cult politics. It doesn't create ideology. It doesn't create movements that have a mission, movements that represent certain interests and have an agenda to get into office and create certain transformation. So it's unfortunate that we're still going in this direction because we saw the outcome it yielded in 2023. And it looks more than likely that if things continue along this script, a very similar scenario to what we saw in 2023 will still play out in 2027. But again, I don't want to focus on the campaign trail because it's 2 years to the election. Let's focus on governance. On governance issues, Governor Zulum has consistently reiterated the need for greater intervention in Borno State regarding the status of security. He has done so repeatedly and he has gone to the battlefront. This time he's bringing a different dimension and he's talking about the bureaucracy, what he's calling contractocracy. Now, I found this to be quite a salient point, because we cannot downplay the impact that corruption and the politics of contracts has on governance in Nigeria. We know that when somebody becomes president or when somebody becomes governor, people move from all parts of the nation to Abuja or to the capital of whatever the state is so they can be closer, all waiting in the corridors of power so they can benefit from one contract or the other. Now, what is the result of that? The result of that is the poor governance that we see. It's incompetence. So in one moment, it may be an incomplete road, but now in this moment, it is now resulting in lapses in security. Of course, the army have maintained that all things are in order, they are realigning, and they have vowed that they will defeat these insurgents, and I believe they will. However, there are some niggling issues that the governor is highlighting. I found it a little bit ironic because in December of 2024, the governor had vowed to give contracts in his state to APC loyalists as a way of rewarding them. But this is how these things come back and bite you, because sometimes you may be a beneficiary of this system, but sometimes you might be on the receiving end of what happens when we operate these systems that are not based on meritocracy. I came across a very thought-provoking interview by a Chinese economist by the name of David Li, who's a former advisor to the Chinese Central Bank. In 2013, in a conversation with Fareed Zakaria, he said that corruption in China is not an economic problem, it's a political problem, because investments, infrastructure still gets built. Things still happen, the money is still used, but yes, politicians will skim off the top and it creates public distrust. But whatever projects are allocated are still completed. But we have a situation where our own corruption here is now becoming a political problem, an economic problem, and now a security problem. So something needs to be done, and there needs to be the political will to tackle it once and for all. He has this information. Can he hand it over to the necessary authorities? And can those authorities also have the boldness to follow through on these investigations, no matter how high and mighty the people implicated may be? Because these are very weighty allegations. Of course, we've already heard from the army as well that there's an increased push from the region at the moment, from the Sahel. There's so many dynamics happening in the region that are causing this push, this new resurgence of insecurity. So it's a reminder again that yes, we've seen that the administration has been doing more to try and renew relationships with the neighbors in the region, but I think more needs to be done in terms of cooperating with our neighbors and also monitoring the porous borders. Now, lastly, he also made mention to the rehabilitated former terrorists, and he said that there are no assurances that these people will not go back. And this is the unfortunate issue we find ourselves with. A situation where we say, let's pull them out, let's rehabilitate them. We need to review this and ask ourselves, is this really the right way to handle this situation, especially given the risks that are currently being posed on the ground? That may need to be assessed. Yes, to non-kinetic. However, maybe a re-strategizing is imperative. Last but not least, on the economy, we've highlighted severally on this table that the interest rate, is grueling. But this is the paradox of economics, is that if your inflation rate is high, what you need to do is raise interest rates so that you can reduce money in circulation and create almost a form of contracting the economy. But the paradox is that what we need right now is economic stimulus. So while numbers may start to look good on the macroeconomic index, what's happening really is that there's a shrinking happening. And that's why most times when you see interest rates continually being maintained, it leads to a recession because it actually contracts your economy. But what are some of the recommendations? This is the time to push funding to the Bank of Industry, where the industrial sector, the productive sector, can access finance at single-digit numbers, at single-digit loans. Incredibly important. This is also a time for us to look at how we can take advantage of the Africa Free Trade Continental Agreements, trade with Africa, trade within the region. Why do I say this? Because the Pan-African Payment Settlement System has just been put into place. Now, this might be a way that can help us to bridge some of the challenges that we have at the moment as we seek to trade closer to home with the production that is stimulated by money that's released to an organization like Bank of Industry at single-digit loans to boost production in our private sector.